Can we really make this a very happy Easter? I wish you all a very happy Easter, dear friends. It's normal for us on this Easter day to say Happy Easter to everyone that we meet. But is that enough? Can we really make this a very happy Easter? And I would like to think about that and speak about that. And I would like to take you back 700 years before Christ when the prophet Isaiah spoke about the coming of Jesus as the Emmanuel. It says, "The virgin shall conceive and bear a son and shall call his name Emmanuel." And St. Matthew uses this prophecy in his Gospel in chapter 1 and adds that the Emmanuel is God with us. Now, this God with us came down to save us from our sin and misery, and He has accomplished His task, teaching and healing and comforting us and inviting back to God. He brought us back to God, and He bought us back to God by taking our sufferings on Himself, taking the burden of our sins on Himself. He purchased us. As we read in Isaiah, again, chapter 53, about the servant song, I would like to just read to you a few verses from there. It says that He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. Surely He has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows. He was wounded for our transgressions and bruised for our iniquities. And with His stripes we are healed. The Lord has laid on Him the iniquity of us all. He poured out His soul to death and was numbered with the transgressors. Yet He bore the sins of many and made intercession for the transgressors. Well, we are those transgressors. The whole world has transgressed against God, and He made intercession for us. He paid the price, and we are free. He accomplished what He came to do. It is finished. Consummatum est, He said on the cross before He died. Now, even though we are at Easter, we must not forget the cross, because that is really the center of the whole world. And it is through His cross that He has brought us to the joy of the resurrection. And that's why the cross is very much there. When Jesus came to meet His disciples after the resurrection, according to Gospel of St. John, chapter 20, verse 19 onwards, we read, He came into that closed room where the disciples were for fear of the Jews, and He said, "Peace be with you." And after that, what did He do? He showed them His hands and His feet and His heart that was broken. He showed them His wounds. And it is through these wounds that the disciples really recognized that He is Jesus. He is the wounded one, wounded to save us from our sinfulness. And therefore, when we think about Easter, living the new life of Easter, the first thing that we need to do is to decide to change our life of sinfulness and enter into the company of the Emmanuel to live the life of Easter. St. Thomas Aquinas was once asked by his sister about how she can become a holy person. And he just said two words: will it. Decide it. And once we decide, then things begin to change. So we need to change from our sinful ways, and we need to take the ways of Jesus that He has taught us. So, how shall we do this? It is through fellowship with Jesus. It is His presence that will save us. It is His remembrance that we think of Him and call upon His name, and we shall be saved. It is when we forget Him that we fall back into sin. So we need to start living a life every moment as far as we can in the company of Jesus, continuing to listen to Him and doing what He has told us to do in the gospel. So we shall change our hatred into forgiveness, our revengefulness into our loving kindness for those who have offended us. We shall also change our sorrow into joy, because we are the Easter people, joyful people. Remember St. Paul telling us, rejoice in the Lord always. Again I say rejoice. Let all men know your forbearance. The Lord is at hand. And that's the source of our joy. Shall we change? Shall we become joyful? Shall we become forgiving? Shall we become generous? And this is where very often we stumble, because we are people who are selfish by nature, and we want to collect and store as much as we want, as much as we can, all kinds of things. Now Jesus tells us to be generous, to feed the poor, to clothe the naked, to welcome strangers, to become friends with everybody, to evangelize, to build houses for the poor, to make everyone rejoice. Let them know that you are an Easter person, that you have Jesus with you. Shall we become like the disciples of Jesus, who really for 40 days after his resurrection ate and drank with him and listened to him, and after he ascended into heaven, they were ready to give their life for Jesus. Most of them ended up as martyrs, and they were so convinced about the resurrection of Jesus, about the new life that they were living, about the presence of Jesus in their life. Shall we live that new life of Easter? I wish you all a very happy and holy Easter.